What is going on, guys? Coach Desi here from Team Outlier, and today I'm going to be talking all about the concept of the powerlifting off season. I want to talk about what it is, what you can hope to accomplish during it, and then 5 key takeaways that you can steal for your own training. So if that sounds good to you, let's go ahead and dive in. First off, what is an off season? In powerlifting, it's a little bit of a misnomer because we aren't really a seasonal sport like football. Most people just have a few meets picked out throughout the year and we structure our training around those. For some people, they draw this really hard line in the sand between off season and in season. And maybe that's 12 weeks out or whatever it is for them. But the training before and after that line looks very, very different. Other folks, and I think this is becoming more popular in modern powerlifting, don't really have that big of a distinction between the two periods. The lines are a little bit blurrier, and training year-round starts to look a lot more similar. Like almost everything else, I find the truth to be somewhere in the middle, where I try to, at least with my own athletes, give them a stimulus in the off-season that's different enough from what we're doing in meet prep, while not getting too far away from the things that we're accustomed to doing. And I'll get into specifics in a little bit. So for our purposes, as vague as it might sound, let's just define the off season as everything that you do outside of the immediate meet prep. So maybe 10 to 12 weeks out and beyond. Now, what is the point of an off season now that we've defined our time frame? In general, I think the off-season is an excellent period of time to be focused on hypertrophy, increasing work capacity, addressing specific weak points, and in general, setting yourself up to have a good meet prep afterwards. Now, like I said a minute ago, there are increasingly more coaches these days who don't draw that big of a distinction between off-season and in-season, and you'll hear these folks say things like, well, if a quality is worth training, like hypertrophy for instance, then it's worth training all the time, not just in the off season. The basic argument of any kind of concurrent training model, right? And I hear that. That's totally true. And I also believe that all of the things that are great about the off season, which I'm going to get into, should to some degree be true of in season as well. You're still going to be tackling weak points. You're still going to be doing hypertrophy work. It's just that these things in my programming have a higher priority in the off season than they do in season. The big difference between these two periods of time is that in competition prep, you're juggling the fact that you have to be getting ready to peak and display your strength in a competition with the competition movements. In the off season, you don't have to worry about peaking for a meet, and so you can afford to place a higher priority on some of the stuff I just mentioned. So basically, there's like infinite ways you could structure your off season as long as you keep those things in mind. And to try to simplify it a little bit, I'm going to give you 5 key takeaways so that you can structure your own training while giving respect to these things. And the first of those is variation. Like I've been saying, there are some coaches, especially nowadays, that don't differentiate that much between what training looks like far away from a meet and very close to a meet. And for at least this one reason, I think that's a bit of a mistake. Firstly, when it comes to the competition movements, the more you do them all the time, the more you're going to be potentially setting yourself up for an overuse type of injury. Doing the exact same pattern in the exact same style all the time can really start to wear on your body, and I've seen it happen, especially as you get more and more advanced as a lifter. So even just for the sake of staying healthy, I use the off season as an opportunity to take a bit of a step back from those movements. Often I'm not entirely removing them from the program, but it's definitely putting them more into the background. A lot of people are scared to do this, both coaches and athletes, because they're afraid that they're going to get worse at the movement if they stop doing it for even 1 week. And in the short term, that is technically sort of true. When you come back to a movement after having not done it for a little bit, it's going to feel weird, it's going to feel rusty, and it's going to take a while to get back in your groove and get technically proficient at it again. But that's okay, because we're not prepping for a specific meet right now, and we don't need to be maximally technically proficient at the competition lifts. We can take that time and energy that we would have spent there and spend it somewhere more important for the bigger picture. And like I said, I'm very often not taking the competition movements away entirely, it's just being de-emphasized. And another point I want to make about variation before we move on is that goes for specific protocols too, not just exercises. If, for example, you're someone who always does a top set and then back down sets, the off season is a great time to shake that up and try something different. The reason being, lots of things work, but almost nothing works forever. If you have a system that works great for you, that's awesome. Save it for when you need it most, like when you're going into a meet. If you use it unendingly, all the time, the well is going to start to run dry. And there's a good chance that it's just not going to produce the same kind of results for you that it once did. That's actually the issue I take with the concept of the golden microcycle, so to speak, and it's something that I think that Mike Tushir and the RTS folks do really, really well. They will purposefully save their favorite training block and position it leading into the meet. And then the block right before that will be whatever works second best for them. So to bring it back, if you're someone who always does, for example, top set first, then back down sets, give a try to some ascending sets or some straight sets or clusters or just something different. That comfortable approach that you love will still be there for you in season. And it'll work even better if you take some time away to resensitize to it. Point number 2 is addressing weaknesses. Now, like I said up top, this is not unique to the off season, but this is a great time to place a little bit of a higher priority on it. Something that I've learned from working more with Dan Green is that the competition lifts for a lot of people are just the best way to display the strength you've built, not necessarily the best way to actually build it. For example, there are a lot of variations that target the specific components of your squat, like your leg strength and your back strength, better than just doing low bar squats all the time, and potentially more efficiently as well. And the off season is a great time to bring those things to the forefront. In season, you're going to be doing the competition lift. It's going to take up the bulk of your time and energy, but right now, that doesn't have to be true. And you can move low bar into the background, and you can bring forward stuff like safety bar, high bar, front squats, whatever it is that you need to move the needle forward on your squat based on your specific weak points. In the same vein, sumo itself can take a backseat for a while you push conventional work. Again, it doesn't take that long, relatively speaking, to get back into the groove of an exercise once you start doing it again. A few weeks into your meet prep and you're gonna feel just as technically proficient as you ever did on your competition lifts. So don't be afraid to lean a little bit more on variation in the off season. My third point is hypertrophy. From a neurological standpoint, a bigger muscle is always preferable to a smaller muscle because it has a higher potential to become a stronger muscle. So it's in your best interest to get as jacked as possible so that you can take all of that new muscle and train it to exert as much force as humanly possible to lift the most weight you can. And once again, this is important all the time, especially for drug-free lifters. But in the off season, we might have the time and energy to devote more to this. And similar to my point about training specific weaknesses, there are way better options for training hypertrophy than the competition power lifts. That's why bodybuilders just straight up don't do them most of the time. So for us in the off season, while we might stick to the demands of our sport a little bit more and emphasize strength, this is a great time to emphasize some things like machine work, think like hack squats or single leg work, or any of those hypertrophy choices that we maybe don't have the time and energy for in season as much. And again, we don't have to be super strong right now because we're laying the foundation here to be even stronger later. Point number 4 is work capacity. Seems strange for a powerlifter, right? If you think so, I encourage you to check your blood pressure right now. Just kidding, sort of. But this is a useful thing that I thought I would mention. You are only going to get as strong as what you can recover from. And stronger people in general can tolerate more training than weaker people. So it makes sense to devote some of your time to being able to directly handle and recover from more work. That doesn't have to mean doing cardio, although it can, and that's not a bad idea for general health. But think more like classic old school GPP work, like West Side Barbell. And yes, that sort of conjures up images of dragging sleds and swinging kettlebells, and that stuff is fine. But for me personally, more so what I'm stressing is maybe timed rest periods, circuits, and in general, just sort of pushing the boundaries on what you can tolerate and recover from. If you haven't before, I encourage you to give it a try. And my 5th and final point is intensity. Generally speaking, a focus of mine in the off season is bringing the absolute intensity or the weight on the bar down while keeping the relative intensity or how difficult each set feels still relatively high. I do this partly to give my lifters' bodies a bit of a break from the heavy loads that they've usually just been lifting during prep, and also to build momentum for the training cycle as a whole, which I'll get into in a sec. I do this in a couple of ways, the most obvious of which is just increasing the number of reps on average that you're doing in each set. So even if it's still a competition squat being pushed to an RPE 9, if you're doing a set of 6 to 8, it's going to be a lot less weight on the bar, less absolute intensity than for a single or a double. And the relative intensity is the exact same. The other way is that I tend to use a lot of variations, like I said above, and many of those are self-limiting. So on stuff like safety bar squats and front squats, you simply can't lift as much weight as you can with the more mechanically advantaged low bar squat. So all that being said, the advantage again is being able to build momentum as you go. It's very easy and it flows really well to follow that sort of linear-ish periodization where you go from a place of doing high reps early in the training cycle to lower reps as you get closer to competition. It's not rocket science, I know. But the same is true of variations as well, where I find it advantageous to go from doing more mechanically disadvantaged exercises earlier in the prep to more loadable ones closer to meet day. And of course, it sort of comes full circle and ties in with the other 4 points: hypertrophy, targeting weaknesses, building work capacity, and variation for its own sake as well. And that's it. I think I've rambled long enough. I hope at least someone out there found this useful, and if you guys have questions about it, please leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.